This is the third video looking at the unit circle. We are looking at the third quadrant. So we've already talked about how in the first quadrant, using our unit circle, that all of our ratios are positive. So the first quadrant is really the quadrant that we normally work in when we're looking at right angle triangles. But we're trying to extend our understanding a little bit so that we can think about situations where we have angles bigger than we would normally find in a triangle, and yet our ratios in some sense can still apply. So in the second quadrant, S for second is also S for sine is the only ratio that's positive. And now we're going to look at the third quadrant. So what's going on? So we're talking about our angles. We always measure our angles from our 0 point, our x-axis, and the positive side of the x-axis, and we work in an anti-clockwise direction. So even though when I've drawn, or this triangle has been drawn and the size of the angle in here is named theta, when I'm thinking about what is the size of the angle measured from this point, I've gone 180 degrees all the way around, okay, plus whatever that little bit is. Okay, so when I'm talking about sine or cos or tan of the angle here, I'm looking at an angle that is 180 plus whatever theta is. 180 plus whatever that theta is. Okay, now remember in the second quadrant, it's 180 minus whatever theta is. Getting us into the third quadrant is 180 plus theta. Okay, so we're in the third quadrant. Let's think about what our x and y values are doing. So I'm looking at x, the value of x here. Okay, so this is my distance out to where my point meets, lines up with the x-axis. Okay, so x is negative here. And as a change from the last two quadrants, y, so this is my distance out here, y is also negative. So how does this affect our different ratios? I'm going to do them over on the left-hand top side of the screen here. So sine of 180 plus theta is actually going to be exactly the same again as sine of theta in this quadrant, except that what's going to happen? So sine is still just y, whatever our y value is in our unit circle is sine. In this case, y is going to be negative. So the numbers that I get are going to be exactly the same as doing sine of theta, except that my answer is going to be negative. So when I'm looking at an angle that's 180 plus theta, and I put that into my calculator, I'm going to get an answer that's exactly the same as sine of theta, except that I'm going to have a negative symbol in front of it. What's going on with cos? Cos of an angle that is 180 plus whatever theta is also going to be exactly the same as cos of theta, except it's in the other side, so it is going to be the same as negative cos of theta. What's going to happen to tan? Once again, tan is going to be exactly the same as tan of theta in the first quadrant, except that y and x are both negative, and when I divide two negative numbers, I'm going to have a positive. So tan of 180 plus theta is actually going to be exactly the same answer as doing tan of theta.